Hi, everyone. This is Nathan Williamson. I serve as our Director of Title Grants and Support for the Indiana Department of Education. Today, we are going to be hosting the first webinar of our four-part series to be able to address more in-depth questions and topics regarding the CARES Act. We hope that this information will be very pertinent for you as you start working on your applications. So the first piece I want to mention today is I have another individual, Andrew Mazer, who is our state ombudsman for equitable services for our non-public schools and LEAs. He is joining me. We are going to co-host this today. Since we are anticipating a large crowd, we are using YouTube, which then the method for you to ask questions is going to be via email. So you should see a banner at the bottom of your screen that has my email address to be able to send questions to. I will be monitoring that as we go and then at the end, and then we will revisit any questions that we can live and then questions that we can't or that we need to gather more information. We will definitely get back to you on those. So to start out, we did release an agenda for today. The bulk of today, we're going to address the allowable activities of CARES because, really everyone should be thinking about that now since they got their allocations this week. We're also going to spend some time talking about equitable services for non-public schools. Next week, we are hoping everything should be live and ready to go for you to start applying for the CARES Act funding, and so we're going to be talking about that more in depth. We also hope that the federal guidance, and we have been promised a frequently asked question guidance document, is going to be coming out around week 2 or week 3. So whenever the feds release that, we will make sure that we take time to digest that and share any information that's additional or different than what we've already talked about with you. So we'll add those to week 2 or week 3 when we're ready there. And then week 4, we're going to talk about monitoring, reporting, and then plans that the state is going to use to support you all with our 10% set aside of the CARES Act funding. So these are potential topics. As you have questions of what we have to share with you today about allowable activities and equitable services, definitely send those. If they are the other topics, you're welcome to send those too. Just know that those are more likely that we'll have to get back to you, but we'll definitely do our best on whatever you have that is on your mind. So the first piece we want to start out with is a disclaimer. To date, we have not really gotten any written guidance from the U.S. Department of Ed. We've gotten some verbal information. We haven't gotten what we typically call our non-regulatory guidance, where the federal government will interpret what is written in law and regulation and provide that to us to help guide how we implement the programming. We haven't gotten any of that, so everything that we are sharing with you today is based upon what the law says, our interpretation, and we are grateful that we have a really good relationship with lots of other states, and so we've been working together with them to make sure that, we didn't miss anything or what are they thinking about this. And so we'll definitely do our best to give you information now, and then we'll adjust if the U.S. Department of Ed comes out with something that's a little bit different. We prefer to do it that way instead of just waiting for their guidance because we may still not get it for a little while. And the funding is live now. And so those things that are pretty clear, we want to get started on. Some of the things that are gray that we'll have to tell you, we'll get back to you. That way we can wait on those. So just a big disclaimer, but we definitely want to be supporting you now so that we can proceed because we know these are emergency funds. So week 1 topics, we're going to spend our and you will be able to access this slide deck. to be able to support you in these topics that we're covering today. So the first one I want to address is in the allowability column. So we have released a CARES Act recommendation flyer. And this is on our website. You'll see it tomorrow in Dr. McCormick's weekly messages. This is a list of recommendations. We could not put everything on here that's allowable because the law is super flexible. These are suggestions, things that the law has called out, things that we definitely view as okay, because we want to be as flexible as we can to meet the needs of your schools. So before we cover this flyer, some reminders at the top. Obviously, all of these things are contingent upon things like state and local restrictions. So, for example, we're recommending that you think about summer school. Obviously, the ability to have in-person summer school yet hasn't been determined. So we just want you to keep that in mind, that that's a general disclaimer as we're giving you suggestions. The second thing is, even though Title I formula drove how much money your school districts or charter school and then ultimately non-public schools will receive for equitable services, this is not Title I money. It can be used for Title I purposes, but it can be used for a large list of other things. So when you get the money, think of federal education money, not Title I only allowable purposes. So a common misconception, do I only have to use this at Title I schools? No. Can I only use this for Title I eligible children in my non-public school? No. You can use it for much more than that. The third bullet says, in law, anything that is federal education money, such as special ed, so IDEA, Title I, Title II, Title III, Title IV, 21st Century, which is our grants that we use for out-of-school time learning, after-school programs, Perkins, McKinney-Vento, which is our homeless education funding, Perkins is our career tech ed. All of those are allowed under CARES. There are also other allowable activities that CARES called out specifically, and we'll cover those next. Non-public school activities, those must be non-ideological, secular, and neutral in nature, just like all federal education money has to be. And then the normal rules of EDGAR and OMB circulars, which are fiscal rules that govern that you have time and effort, that you have backup documentation when you make purchases, that you have internal controls when you make purchases. This money will contribute to future federal audits by State Board of Accounts. All of those things are normally applied to federal education funds, and they will be to these as well. So our recommendations, we gave 5 bucket areas that we encourage you to think about. If they're on this list, these are easy, not stop, pass go, collect your $200 ideas that you can start implementing and know that we're going to give you a very fast approval, because we definitely are encouraging you to do those. We're asking you to think of short-term and long-term needs. There are short-term needs right now. You may need some more Chromebooks tomorrow to be able to finish out the year. You may need some hotspots. Now, obviously, hopefully we have vendors that can fill those. But long-term needs, we have gaps in learning when children are going to return back to school in the fall. We have mental health needs that are not quickly addressed. And then we may not know in the future how the COVID-19 pandemic is going to change and affect us differently in the fall. The runway for this money is quite long. So we want you to think about, what do you need right now? And then you can always amend and budget for other needs that you could keep some of the money back in terms for long-term plans as well. So remediation is the first bucket we want you to think about. Anything that you would consider a gap in learning due to the school disruptions. So if you want to have summer school, if you want, and again, this is removing of local restrictions, state restrictions to be able to have in-person, but obviously virtual is an option too. Starting school early, having a longer school day, having a longer school year. You might want in your high-need schools to have additional teachers to be able to push in and co-teach and have extra intervention groups, extra remediation groups, enrichment groups to help catch kids up, to help push them along. And so those are all definitely allowable. The resources that you need to, that are associated with it. Anything that's specific for wanting to support students with additional needs, such as students with disabilities, English learners, foster, homeless, migrant, low income, and so on. We know that those student groups are in additional need under normal circumstances, even more so now. So definitely work with the district level administrators, your school level staff, your parents of those communities to make sure you address those needs. Tech preparedness, additional devices. Obviously, having one-to-one or one for every family is helpful and important. We know that some of you are ordering devices that have the internet connectivity already built in with hotspots or buying additional hotspots. Maybe you don't have a learning management system and you would like to purchase one, or you might be using a free one. Professional development is key. So right now, educators are doing a great job of turning this around quickly to make sure continuous learning still occurs. But we know long-term, we have to plan for what happens if we're not ready to go right away in the fall with a full-time regular schedule and we have more e-learning in the fall, or if a second pandemic occurs, we need to be ready to go then too. And so any professional development that you want. And later in our series, we are going to be talking about what the state is doing to support this, and we know that this is a huge state need for us that we're going to be supporting you in as well. Curating materials, offline courses, and so on. Those are pretty common activities that you may have budgeted federal funds for in the past. One that you probably never have budgeted for is cleaning. CARES Act specifically calls out cleaning as an allowable activity. So if you want to deep clean the schools when we are approved to host in-person learning, you may have to have extra janitorial staff to deep clean in between shifts of children or each day, extra sets of hands, more cleaning supplies for teachers for each of their classrooms, for them to help with and the students to help with cleaning their desks, personal protective equipment, if you need more of that. Those are all allowable activities. Normally, we would never say yes with federal money. With CARES, it's a clear yes, and we will approve those. Social emotional learning is a big piece. We know there are gaps in education in terms of academic learning because of this, but there are also needs related to SEL, great needs because of this pandemic. So if you want to purchase more money for students who normally would never be able to be served because of lack of funding from the family, they don't qualify for Medicaid, you could purchase more time to make sure any kid in need would get that service. We know educators are in need too. And so support groups for educators so that they can support their children that are in their classes. Online platforms for screeners, other options here, mental first aid training, increasing employee assistance programming, telehealth services. All of those are suggestions and options. The last one, we were glad to work with our Perkins counterparts that work at the governor's workforce cabinet. And they mentioned, if students have not been able to finish on-hand programming, in-person programming because of the pandemic, they're going to need to be able to make up that somehow to finish out licenses and certifications. So, so one suggestion is to be able to have bridge programming, whether it's in the summer, if we're allowed to, after school, for kids to be able to get in some of those hours, clinical hours. And in this, it would be definitely okay to use funding to support transportation. So definitely use that flyer to help prod your thinking. There are more activities beyond this, but those are options. We do have an IDOE FAQ specifically for CARES. I know Dr. McCormick and our Chief of Staff, Kelly Whitman, have been referencing our FAQ that is the general FAQ. We also have an FAQ just for the federal CARES Act funding. So we have a link for you here and has a lot of information written down. So we want to refer you to that. Assurances, the grant application will come out very soon. You'll be able to see the assurances in there. One piece is a specific clause in CARES that says, to the greatest extent practicable, you will still be paying your people. And we are going to have a question for you to affirm that you are or are not. And if you're not, what's the justification for that? Because of the way the law is written, obviously there are some extenuating circumstances which you can be able to describe within the application. But the intent of it is that teachers and other staff members are still getting paid. One key part with CARES, there is no supplement, not supplant language in CARES. So many of you that are used to federal education funds, you may have said, well, I can't do that, that's supplanting. Well, in this case, there is none of that. So we're going to solely be looking at allowability. So you may have done things in past years and you want to now do it with CARES, that's okay. There may be things that are allowed in CARES that are also required by state law. As long as it's allowed in CARES, you can do it with CARES. Some things that are clearly not allowable, and this was in some of the verbal guidance that we've gotten from the U.S. Department of Ed, and then the application we had to submit. They are not expecting us to approve any executive salaries, especially those that are not employees of the LEA. But it probably would not be approvable and recommended for you to ask to pay for a part of the superintendent's salary with CARES, for example. Another thing that the feds have said that we are not to approve is any costs associated with unions, and then anything that is general bonuses or merit-based pay that is not directly related to COVID-19. Now, if you have requests for bonuses and merit pay that is directly related to something that now is occurring because of the pandemic, and you would like us to consider that, by all means, you can ask us. But this one is put into here so that LEAs are not just saying, well, let's just across the board increase everyone's pay because we haven't done it in a few years. The expectation is there needs to be justification for its high to the pandemic and not a general piece. All right. Next piece that I have, fiscal requirements. The feds are going to allow us to backdate any allowable costs to March 13th, 2020, which is when the president declared a national emergency. So anything that was on our flyer that we are recommending, as long as you give us a budget breakdown so that we know it's reasonable and necessary. If you bought some of these things between March 13th and now, so for example, if you bought a bunch of additional devices because you needed it, and you bought it with other funds, but now you know it's allowed under CARES and you can backdate to March 13th, if you have the ability to do so, you could budget it in CARES, and then the money that you did spend on those things are now freed up for other uses. So that's one piece with the backdating that you could do. Encumbering, which means you have to carry out the activities by then, is allowed through September 20th. That should say September 30th. I'm sorry. September 30th, 2022. I didn't catch that. You are allowed to carry out the activities through that time. So that's why we want you to think about short-term and long-term activities. And then you can liquidate through December 15th of 2022. We are going to be issuing you new award letters here soon that has the CFDA number, the award number that you need for your CFA reporting. We also issued the final allocations for everyone, which there is a large link here that you can find yours, but we'll be sending out another letter that has the individual numbers for your LEA. All right, last but not least, we want to talk about special education a little bit. We've gotten a lot of questions from special education directors. Is there a required set-aside of CARES? What's the administrative set-aside? For CARES, there is not a required set-aside for special education, as there was in past federal education stimulus funds. It remains an allowable activity, and it actually is encouraged several different times, 5 different times, it looks like. So it definitely is an option. And so what we would encourage special education teams to do is if you have special education needs, for example, compensatory services, and we're going to put out some more information about this very soon, but if there are compensatory services required because of a court order, for example, that will not be allowed. But if it's compensatory because you need to catch up on services due to this pandemic, you will be allowed to use it with CARES, and we'll be able to show you how to code that properly. So special education teams, co-ops, interlocals, SPED directors, and so on need to collaborate with whomever is overseeing CARES for the local school district and making sure that that discussion is had at the local level and, if interested, included in the local budget that's submitted to the state. All right, so those are some initial pieces. Andrew is going to cover the equitable services piece so that we can support you all in carrying out with non-public schools. So I'll let Andrew take over, and then we will circle back to the questions that I'm getting and cover the questions after Andrew has covered the equitable services. So, Andrew?
Thank you, Nathan. I just wanted to take a moment to say thank you to all of the LEAs and non-public schools that have been a part of this process, and that I appreciate everything that you have done. So I just want to point out on the PowerPoint that you see at the bottom, there is a link to the Ombudsman webpage. This will be a great resource for you that you will be able to find links not only to just equitable services under CARES, but also equitable services in general. But there is a specific tab for the CARES Act and Indiana non-public schools, which is going to have resources for those topics that I will discuss today. So first, consultation. Under CARES Act, LEAs are required to consult with non-public schools that reside within their district. You guys have been doing this anyway with a lot of your schools for title funds. This is just a requirement that making sure that you do discuss CARES Act with those non-public schools. Once you have your CARES Act final allocation, you will be able to spend it on any of those allowable activities that Nathan highlighted earlier in the presentation. Think about the short term right now, because I know a lot of schools have been very active in trying to help their students, both at the non-pub and the pub, and that you should be thinking short-term, mid-term, and even long-term goals and amendments can be made. I do want to make it very clear, just like with any federal funding, the money is going to be, or the fiscal agent will be the LEA. So non-public schools will have to consult with ongoing, timely, meaningful consultation, where you will be having conversations throughout the year to see how the money is being spent or how you would like to spend it. But as has been stated in this whole process, there's a lot of flexibility to make sure that we're using the money. Again, I just want to say thank you. I know you guys are sending in questions to Nathan. My email is also up there to help in the process. This came about during a time when LEAs would normally be reaching out to consult about Titles 1 through 4. So this is an added layer to this process, and you're allowed to have those conversations where you talk about title and you say, hey, let's put the brakes on title for a second and talk about CARES Act funding, because we are asking that LEAs and non-public schools sign off that they have discussed CARES Act funding, because it is a requirement through the CARES Act. And as Nathan said, as more federal guidance is put out, may it be a non-reg, fact sheets, we will make sure to put that information and make it available for you individuals because we're waiting for it as well, and we appreciate your patience. And I think I am done for now. I know in the next couple of weeks I may have an equitable share update that I will provide each week to you guys and working with Nathan. But from here, I will give it back to Nathan to add anything that I may have missed or may have forgotten to mention.
All right. Thank you, Andrew. So a little bit of additional info, and then we'll start addressing the FAQs that we're getting. So tentative due date would be the end of June. We are working on getting the application ready to go now. If an LEA needs more time than this, that's fine. It's just that you won't be able to access the funding until you apply. So the key part is we also need to make sure to get it to the non-public schools who are in need of it too. And so we can work with you if you have some circumstances, if you have staff turnover, for example, that makes it difficult to hit that exact date. But we should be able to open the application center next week. The application is going to be very simple. A couple narrative questions, a district level budget for the school district, and then individual non-public school budgets. One of the questions that we got is, do non-public schools apply separately? No. You will do it the same way that you've done Title I in the past, which is LEA consults with the non-public school, and based upon that consultation, the LEA will enter in the non-public school's requests directly into the system on behalf of the non-public school. And then the LEA will apply for everyone, themselves, as well as all of the non-public schools who are within their entities. Last piece I want to mention with that is, if you know you have short-term needs right now, maybe you got a grant, for example, that was $1 million, and you know you have short-term needs that you need to address right now. If you want to just submit a budget for those short-term needs, get it approved through us so that you can seek reimbursement, and then hold off on submitting the remainder of it till a later time, that's okay. We know you may not know all of your needs immediately, and we're expecting that you won't. You're also welcome to submit a budget for the entire thing initially because you've set out a long-term plan according to the dollars you get. But if things change and you need to shift, we are going to allow amendments just like we do with anything else. All right. If you will give me a minute or two, I'm going to step away, finish looking through the FAQs, and then come right back.
Andrew Mazer again. As Nathan is looking through the questions that he's getting in his email box, I did just want to point out that during consultation, a part of the process is a face-to-face meeting. And I know with everything going on, that's not allowed. So I do want to clarify that e-signatures will be okay for the consultation forms. That has been probably my number one question that I'm getting about making sure that we prove that these conversations are happening. So yes, an e-signature will be okay in order in this process.
All right. I am going to do my best to address all of these. I have gotten quite a few questions that even just being able to read them all to verbally answer might take me 15 minutes or so, and then to be able to come back. So we'll do our best. If I don't answer your question, especially if you sent it in the last couple minutes, I will reply to you in writing, as well as those that I answer verbally. So first question that I got, yes, you'll get the posted slides. We'll put them on our website. We'll share it out through Dr. McCormick's messages. The flyer and the other documents that we mentioned, the flyer's already on the website, the doe.in.gov/grants. It's at the top, but it's also a direct message about it. It's coming out tomorrow in Dr. McCormick's weekly messages. Let's see. When are the funds going to be available? As I mentioned, the application, I got the official funding. Money hit our bank today from the U.S. Department of Ed. We're finishing up the online system for you all to start applying next week. Our entire team is going to be ready to go to start reviewing those as soon as we get them. And so I always hold our team to a high standard to review and approve them in a quality but efficient way. We're definitely going to do this with CARES. So you'll be able to start accessing it soon. The backdating of costs, if LEAs have already purchased activities that are allowable and they were March 13th or after, you could include those, request reimbursement, and then the original funding stream that you use could be freed up for something else. One caveat I would mention is with non-public schools, the public control of funds, you cannot reimburse a non-public school. You have to order on behalf of. So this would be if the LEA ordered already for the non-pub, then they could backdate those costs. However, many of you probably didn't do that because you didn't know if you would get reimbursed. And so I would start working with your non-pubs right now if there are any requests that are unfilled. I know many of you have started your consultations, and if you haven't for CARES, you need to start right now. But if the non-pubs spent their own money, you wouldn't be able to send them a check because we can't reimburse the non-pubs. We have to do it on behalf of because of the public control rules. Another question, if there are fees for students, such as textbook fees, for parents who have recently lost their jobs, or other fees that are similar in nature to that, absolutely, you can cover that with CARES if it's educationally related, like textbooks. Obviously, pursue normal routes, like textbook reimbursement. However, I don't oversee that, and so if windows have closed, and so on, or other things where windows have closed, maybe they were set to take an AP test and were full pay, and it wasn't one of the exams that IDOE covers, and then now they're free and reduced because of a parent losing their job, and you want them to still be able to take the test, by all means, you could use the CARES Act to pay for it. Class size reduction, could we use that with the funds? A cautious yes. That's a Title II allowable activity, so you could do that at the LEA. For the most part, all of these allowable activities for the public and private schools are exactly the same. So the cleaning, the Chromebooks, the SEL activities, and so on, as long as they're secular. Title II class size reduction is the one item that's different. You wouldn't be able to reduce class size at the non-pubs. But with this being said, this is non-sustainable money. So if any of you ask for staffing out of this funding, I would caution you to make sure you have a strong plan for sustainability. Maybe your class size reduction plan is we want to reduce it just for a couple years to make sure kids catch up from the disruption, and then we'll go back to larger class sizes. But if you had other staffing requests, we want to hire another social worker. We don't have any at the elementary levels. Well, what are you going to do when this funding is up? So a cautious yes, but for staffing, I want to make sure you think through sustainability and have a response for that for us to be able to approve it. Non-public schools, I mentioned the requirement in CARES that you need to still be paying your people to the greatest extent practicable to be eligible for CARES. That requirement applies to those that receive the funds, which is legally only the LEAs. So the requirement to continue paying your staff, obviously we want everyone to be paid to the greatest extent practicable, but that rule does not apply to the non-public schools. So LEAs, if you're working with your non-pubs, you don't need to be asking them that question, have you been paying your people? Otherwise we won't be eligible for CARES. That is not applicable to the discussion with the non-pubs. Summer school, I did mention, obviously we don't know if we can do it in person or not. The great expectation is that no one's going to be able to do it in person. And so, yes, if you want to do virtual summer school planning with this funding, that is definitely allowed. But also think of summer school in future years. You know, this money runs through summer school and beyond next summer. So you might be able to think about that too. But nothing has changed about the recommendation or likely requirement that no one's going to be able to offer in-person summer school. That is above my decision, above Dr. McCormick. That is of when schools can open. I had a question about food service. Food service budgets have taken a hit because you're not feeding the students that fully pay for their lunches. You're only getting reimbursed for students who are on free or reduced lunches. And therefore, you still have the same number of staff that it's still rather difficult to be able to get everything ready to be able to do the grab and goes. If you have some budget shortfalls because of that, could we shore up those budget shortfalls? This is a COVID-19 pandemic example that it's happened because of this. So yes, obviously we'll ask you for a little bit of breakdown, but offsetting and making sure those budgets are shored up are an option. Someone said, can we pay any other salaries beyond executive members? Another reason to be cautious about paying just regular salaries, especially those that you have already on staff, unless there's an example like the budget shortfall that I just mentioned for food service. This federal funding, along with special ed, Title I, and so on, have maintenance of effort clauses, and so does CARES. Maintenance of effort is in most federal law that says if you don't spend 90% of what you did the year before, then we are going to reduce your federal money by every percent that you spend less than 90. So if you spent 85% of what you did the year before because you chose to use all your CARES Act money to pay for salaries, then next year, the difference between 85 and 90% may be a penalty for your federal education funds. Special education has a maintenance of effort too, that every year you're committing yourself to using a certain percentage of state and local funds on special education needs. So even though CARES Act money can support special education, it shouldn't be replacing what you had already planned to do because you're going to run into maintenance of effort problems. What I would encourage you to think about is what is it that's additional because of the COVID-19 pandemic that is a need that you can address, rather than paying for costs that you already have the funding for and that is already maintained. So there are options that we can discuss in depth with you, but I would encourage you to think of the maintenance of effort issues that might occur because of that. All right. I am going to address more questions that I'm getting the best I can. There's no way I'm going to get through all these, so we'll try. Okay. Let's see. Okay. If a non-public school wants to use their share for cleaning, do they hire the cleaning service or does the LEA hire the cleaning service? Because of the public control of funds, the non-public school is never going to be signing the contract with a vendor. They're never going to be signing the invoice. They're never going to be paying directly. They could definitely seek out and get quotes if they wanted and give them to the LEA, but the LEA is the one that's doing the agreements and the purchases. So you are going to have the non-pub, if they have a cleaning service that they know they want to use, and obviously there are still procurement rules, so depending on how big the cleaning bid is, if it's $10,000 or more, then you would have to get at least 2 bids. But the LEA is going to hire the cleaning service and send them to the non-pub. Otherwise, if the non-pub did it, you would have to cut a check and pay the non-pub, and you can't do that. That would be an issue with the public control of funds. Let's see. Will IDOE provide a consultation form to be used with non-public schools for CARES? Yes, we've already provided it. It's on our Ombudsman website. And it's added to the general form. So the general form has all of the grants on it, titles 1, 2, 3, 4, and so on that require equitable services. We've added CARES to it. So what we'd encourage you to do is you should already be starting consultation for next year anyways, and add CARES to the discussion so that you know how to budget for it now too. But you could do it separately. Can non-public schools have different priorities than their LEA? Yes. The expectation is that non-pubs are going to have different needs than an LEA. It's a different school system entirely. So LEAs, when consulting with your non-public schools, if you want to spend all your money on X and non-public school A wants to do Y, non-public school B wants to do C, those are all okay and encouraged, and you are not going to mandate the same thing for all of you. So that's all determined through consultation. And LEAs who have multiple non-public schools who are pulling children from many different LEAs, most of those LEAs are going to transfer their funding to a lead, and that is definitely okay and encouraged with CARES. Those LEAs, make sure you are still reaching out to the non-pubs to make sure you're generating your equitable share so that you can transfer it to the lead. Okay. The non-public schools, if they have children that are enrolling from 10, 15, 20 different LEAs, it's not necessarily their responsibility to reach out to the LEAs. It's the reverse. I know it's beneficial for the non-pubs to be able to tell the LEA, because sometimes an LEA truly doesn't know if a non-pub is not that close, but children are driving a far distance to get to the non-pub. But the LEA needs to be reaching out to the non-pubs, and you may be reaching out to quite a few that are outside your boundaries because it is the Title I formula. All right, if non-pubs have denied services for Title I, does that mean that they cannot participate in CARES? No. They may have said no to Title I in the past. CARES is a different grant, so they are allowed to say no to certain grants, yes to others. So if they said no to Title I, but they want to participate in CARES, then you allow them. In order to allow them, you'll have to ask for data that's exactly the same as the Title I grant. So I would make that clear. They may have turned it down in the past because Title I data is a little bit more difficult to collect, because you're looking at student addresses, poverty information, and what grade levels are the children to be able to determine if they generate funding. But they can participate in CARES, and that general consultation formula is going to be where they can mark that off. Has a fund number been assigned to the CARES Act from the State Board of Accounts? Yes. Off the top of my head, I do not remember what it is. We are going to be issuing you new award letters now that we have our funding and our award number, and we'll put that number on there again. But yes, we do have account numbers, receipt accounts. I put it in the body of the message when we sent you your funding earlier this week. So whomever that message went to in your district, check out that message, but we'll be putting it again in your award letter. Can stipends for tutoring or extra support be paid with this money? Absolutely. Kids are going to need to be caught up. So if you want some more tutoring, transportation to get them home, those are definitely allowable activities. The application to apply for CARES will be within the same Title I application center where you apply for Title I and school improvement. IntelliGrants is not yet ready. We are going to be using that for next year. So the quickest way to get the money to you was for you to apply through the Title I App Center. So you will be, it's title1.doe.in.gov, and the Title I is title numerical 1. Don't spell out O-N-E. But it is not yet there. When it is there, we'll send out an all message with some screenshots for you to know how to get to it. All right. Let's see. All right. Can you charge indirect cost rate to CARES? Yes. You definitely can. As long as it's your approved rate. Can we pay stipends for staff members to do prep work in the summer to prepare and or adjust based upon disrupted learning? Is that allowed? Absolutely. You can do that too. Okay. All right. Let's see. Can non-public schools hire additional staff as well to address learning gaps? The non-public school will not hire the staff. The LEA will. So the LEA needs to hire the staff on as an employee or hire a vendor, a third-party vendor. But they could hire an additional staff member that could pull small groups of kids. It wouldn't be a full-time regular school day teacher because of the public control funds. But just like we do with our Title I staff, they do small groups, work in the back of the classroom, work with kids after school. All of those would be options to hire a staff member to be able to support the children at the non-public school. All right. How soon should non-public schools hear about our allocation from the LEA? We just gave the LEA the final numbers this week, so I would give them a little bit of time. It's not easy to run it. But the main thing is they're able to use the poverty data that they collected from you from 1920 already. And then any new non-public schools that have said no in the past but now want to say yes to CARES definitely can. And so they're getting that data from them. So I would say within a week or two, you might start hearing soon from them. It shouldn't be much longer than that. So I would say during the month of May, you should definitely. But another good caveat to use is what was your Title I equitable share for Title I last year? And 75% of that is an estimate. So if you want to start thinking about possibly how much you might be getting, because the LEAs were given 75% of their Title I allocation, so everyone's will be reduced a little bit if you wanted to compare Title I and CARES. All right, another question, IntelliGrants, does that mean we're not using IntelliGrants? We are going to use IntelliGrants, just not for CARES. So Title I, II, III, IV, the rural low-income monies are going to be in IntelliGrants this upcoming year. We're making good progress on it. We'll be sharing more info soon. But it just wasn't ready to add CARES to it at the last minute and still make sure that next year was ready for our normal grants. So IntelliGrants will be used for next year for other funds, and the Title I App Center is going to be used for the CARES money. All right. Let's see. Okay. Ooh, I was almost done with all the questions, and then about 50 more came in. So I'm going to answer a couple more until 2, and then we will send out written answers as well. Okay. Extenuating circumstances for families. Could we, example, pay for groceries for a family who just lost their jobs due to COVID? Yes, on a very limited basis. So obviously we would encourage long-term. That's not sustainable. You could spend all your money very fast. But immediate needs, family calls up and says they have no food for tonight and the food bank isn't open for 2 more days. Could you get some food to them? Yes. You can't buy gift cards, but you could get some emergency supplies, food, diapers, wipes, cleaning supplies, some basic things. You could get to them and then long-term refer them to community agencies. But immediate needs, absolutely. Okay. Could we pay additional funding? Could we pay support staff? Okay, sorry. Let me make sure I'm understanding this. Yeah. If support staff who are working additional time to support the COVID-19 pandemic needs, like passing out food, additional cleaning, and so on, could we pay them more? Yes. So that would be a merit pay or bonus directly related to this, and not just a general bonus that's a thank you. So that would be an option that you could think of. All right. Will the CARES Act decrease the money we get from the state in next year's budget? That's obviously we have not heard anything about next year's budget in terms of any reductions. Okay. Obviously, things may change in the future. That's why long-term, we would encourage you to think of, if you had to reduce anything, what needs are there. Obviously, the maintenance of effort clause in CARES is there, and it says that the state agrees to maintain its maintenance of effort as well and not reduce its funding. So there's not a direct tie from you getting more care money and your state money is going to be reduced. However, superintendents, CFOs obviously need to prepare for numerous scenarios, including your enrollment might go down. Children might choose other options with their families and so on. But there's not a direct tie between those two things. All right, it is 2 o'clock, and I'm not going to get through all of these by then. I will reply to all of you individually. Hopefully, you got many of your answers that you needed, and we will address more and add to our FAQs as they're needed. Thank you all. You're definitely allowed to ask me questions in between these webinars. You're allowed to email your federal grant specialist, your grants team members that you work for various grants. And we appreciate you signing in. Next week, same time, we will have our next one and talk more about the application itself. All right? Thank you, everyone.